Hello, everyone. Welcome back to 30 Days of Dopamine. Today, we're talking about the rise of analog crafts and sort of the response to generative AI. And today, we're talking with Professor Dr. Shannon Flaherty.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Hi. So, tell us a little bit about yourself because I followed you for forever. I think I don't remember why I started following you, if it was like the Pansy Cottage or Dr. Device
Mm,
dresses and seeing all
mhm,
of your me maids. But
mhm.
yes, I've followed you for a long time and then just nicely slid into your DM. So thank you for saying yes.
Of course, of course. No, I'm really happy. I love this topic. I'm so excited to talk about it. Yeah, about me. I'm a professor of art history at a small liberal arts college, and I've been sewing. Well, I learned when I was younger, when I was a kid, but I've been kind of doing it more seriously since about 2013 or so, when I was in grad school, and I was like, I need to do something else with my brain than just like read all the time. So
Right.
I had a sewing machine that my mom had given me, and I was like, I'm going to pull it out. I kind of know what I'm doing. And it just went from there. And so yeah, I on Instagram I post my outfits that I wear to teach, which is Dr. Device dresses, and all of the various and sundry craft adventures that I go on because I love to tackle a new craft as often as possible. It seems
Well,
so.
and you're also very sort of generous with some of the stuff that you teach. It was like I remember a while ago you had because you teach the history of craft, and you were very generous with giving out like some of your teaching materials and different articles and things that you hand out. And so that was also very I appreciate that as someone who is nerdy and likes to read things. So thank you. But yes, yes.
Absolutely.
And you do something else too. You do what is it, pre-industrial craft time?
Oh, yes. Yeah, when my partner and I get together, we are both like hand workers. We both like to do things. And so I always like to post like, what are we working on tonight? That's our
Mhm.
pre-industrial crafts because they're mostly in like spinning is like their big thing right now. And so we're always doing something that originated in some way before the Industrial Revolution, if not
Right.
lived most of its life before the Industrial Revolution. So that's where we're at.
It's been again, not to be a creeper, but it's been very fun to see different things and like get ideas. It was like there was one point where they were doing what was it, a willow fence or
Mhm,
something.
mhm,
I was like,
mhm.
that's cool. I could do
Yeah,
that, maybe.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So anyway, but that's very cool. So we're talking about everything that's in the news frequently. I live um within 50 miles of four data centers. One is coming up on the outside of town.
Mhm.
So there are people have very strong feelings towards it. And as someone who is an artist and makes their living from things that they make, I don't like it. So, but I think it's been very interesting, and the reason why I wanted to talk to you because I think this is very cool. I feel like there's a pendulum swing in the other direction of just sort of that rejection of the flattening of art and like, no, I'm gonna make stuff with my hands. I am not gonna have technology involved.
Mhm. Yeah. No, it's really interesting to me to see the way that like AI conversations are happening in a lot of different places because I'm in part of that conversation as both an academic and a teacher, and also as like a crafter and a maker and an artist,
Mhm.
and like seeing it affect my life in really different ways
Right.
and seeing its like uptake in some areas and its rejection in other areas, and who and why, when people reject it, like why they're rejecting it, I think is really
Right.
interesting to me. And I am one of the most like vehemently like anti like I want to say like corporate generative AI, like the chat GPTs and things, right?
Yeah.
Like we can caveat it with there are specific scientific applications
Right.
with the technology, sure. I mostly am like really worried and like really concerned with these like big corporate structures that are being sort of shoved upon us,
hmm
like data
It,
centers. Yeah,
and
all that.
it's being put in places where it's like where you don't need it, or people
Yeah.
are like you said, it's like, okay, sure, there's a time and a place. We'll say again, the example I always use is that I used to do purchasing and had to do spreadsheets with like 10,000 lines or something like that. Sure, read
Sure.
that for me. I was like,
Yeah.
there's, spend how much time making pivot tables for Excel spreadsheets. Do
Hmm.
that. That's
Hmm.
fine.
Hmm.
But I don't need a computer to draw me a picture that is in turn taking an idea from someone else.
Yes. Yes. Hmm. Yeah.
So, and but in particular, the let's talk about one particular thing because you have a background in art history. You teach the history of craft.
Hmm.
So I always think it's interesting, and I think it's relevant to this art versus craft.
Yes. Hmm. Yeah. So that is like such an interesting topic to me because of this history of craft class that I teach.
Hmm.
It kind of already existed at Earlham when I got there, and I picked it up and made my own syllabus for it. I hadn't really taught that before. But one of the things that I learned as I was like diving into it more is how recent the invention of that dichotomy is. That this is like not only kind of like an invention from like the Renaissance onwards, but even
Hmm.
from like the Industrial Revolution onwards,
Yeah.
right? This like kind of rediscovery of like the handwork as something that exists in opposition to the machine made, right?
Right.
And as something then that exists in opposition to the artistic. So it's like art, craft, industry, and this kind of like
Hmm.
triangulated space of like differentiation between the three is a really recent invention, right? That
Okay.
like when it comes to like the like human handicraft, like making things with your hands, pre-industrial revolution, like every bit that
It
everything was
just
that way, right?
was. Yeah.
It just was.
Right.
And that like in I should like caveat this with I'm talking about like European history.
Yes.
Um, in European history, the idea of like the artist as like a specialized like individual genius is very
Hmm.
much a like Renaissance onward invention. It didn't exist before that. And it exists in very different ways in cultures outside of European cultures, right? That like the idea of like art as its own category outside of other things
Hmm.
is like recent and geographically specific to like European in the like colonial era.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting with that for me is the ways that that dichotomy then definitely like privileges art over craft, right? You get the like devaluing of craft. You get that craft gets associated with women, which adds to the devaluation because we devalue femininity anyway,
Right.
which takes us back to many other things, right? Um, but also that you get this idea that like these like acts of making are not something that's accessible to anybody, that like you have to be special to do it, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that's like one of the things that I want to push against the most is like it sort of doesn't matter to me if you think of this as art and this is craft. It's
Hmm.
more that anybody can do any of them, right? And you just
Yes.
sort of like need to give yourself that permission and like figure out what it is that it means to you and like take it up. And then kind of you can think about like where it fits into these bigger discussions, I
Yeah.
think.
I always tell this story when different times for when I teach. So when I was at a quilt show on the East Coast and it was a big show and there were three ladies in front of me looking at a quilt and it was in the newly made sort of art quilt section and it was so the definition of a quilt is just three layers put together, right? That's so quilting can be anything. So it was had metal stitch on top of it and like big stitch quilting and it was painted and all this other things. And so these three ladies were in front of me and they were looking at it. I was like, that's not a quilt, that's just art. And so, and
Mm.
then they're just like looked
Mhm.
disgusted and walked away. So then it was just like the other way. It's like which whatever word you like, there's always you've got these fine art quilters that are working to be taken seriously and get their stuff into galleries and be paid appropriately for their stuff. And then you've got the other hand that is like, that's not for me. I don't want anything to do with that. That's not what I'm making here. And
Yeah.
so, and then in the middle of all of those things, you've got AI coming up and is like, well, now
Mhm.
there's this is like take
Mhm.
us seriously in the middle of any of those conversations.
Yeah, yeah. And what's interesting to me is that my area of specialization from grad school, particularly, is actually contemporary new media art. So it's
Oh,
actually art
oh,
that is not craft, and art
Hmm.
that is not painting, is not sculpture. It's performance art, it's
Hmm.
participatory art, it's digital art, video art, things like that is what my like specialization, what my like dissertation was in.
Okay.
And in some ways I think that kind of prepped me to have this idea of like both anything can be art, right? There's sort of that thing. But
Yes.
that kind of statement isn't actually that interesting to me. It's sort of more like, okay, if art is not necessarily about the materials you use
Hmm.
or like the process by which you make it, then like what is more important? And for me, it's always about like the kind of conversation you're trying to have, right? Like
Okay.
what are you trying to do with it? And that's where I still see sometimes like it is kind of okay with me. I kind of am not bothered if I say like this thing that I made is craft, this thing that I made is art because I'm trying
Hmm.
to do different things with them maybe, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so there's this way in which I think we can break down the dichotomy because of the way it devalues one.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I think one of the things that's interesting to me is the conversation around like, what are we trying to do with it? And that's where like AI comes in is like, if all you're
Yeah.
trying to do with it is make an image, sure, AI can make art. But like, that's not all we do with images, right?
Right.
Like, images are like communication devices. They're things that we use to like be in touch with other people. They're things that we
Hmm.
use to like say things about our feelings and our identities and our beliefs and our opinions and all these things, right? They're things that we use to investigate big ideas. And like AI can't do that because
No.
that's in the making.
The best that I can say for those sorts of things, because I've had people sort of fight me in the comments about different things, which is always fun. Um,
Yes.
but like the saying sort of things, if people knew what it took to create that prompt, then they'd have more value to it. I'm like, no, because there's all those studies that come out as like the more you learn about it, the less you use AI. Um,
Mhm.
and then there's also I always see those conversations where in either a professional setting, academic setting, whatever, the people who are in charge are
Mhm.
saying things like, well, you can use it for this and something that they know less about. But obviously, this is more important. This is
Mhm.
something what their knowledge base
Mhm.
is, and they always say, well, AI can't do this right, so you shouldn't do it over here. So I think that's an interesting pushback. If you're getting it from artists that are saying, no, AI can't do this, is like, then it leads me back to the whole thing about what your knowledge base is about what you're trying to create.
Yeah, totally. It's the like, if I give it a prompt about something I don't know anything about, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's really good at explaining particle physics to me. It's like,
Yeah.
no, it really isn't, right? I just don't know anything about particle physics,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, yeah, yeah. And the like, yeah, the question of like, oh, you just don't know the work that goes into it. It's like, I actually like, I don't know in that I'm not like a computer programmer, so I don't know the
Yes.
like nuances of how that is created. But like I understand how AI works. I understand
Hmm.
how generative AI works and what it is doing and what it isn't doing, right? And like coming from my background in like new media art,
Hmm.
like I knew very intimately like how conceptual art worked, how it was made, right? So it's not me not understanding how
Right.
it's made. It's that like I am able to kind of look at that and say, I don't value the way that it is made.
Yes. Yes. And then, okay, so this is a perfect segue into something else. So saying that, neither one of us are computer programmers. I programmed my MySpace back in 2000, like 7 or whatever. That's the extent. Okay. So, but one of the things with this swing back towards to hands-on analog crafts is something called a cyber deck, which has been across, if you're watching and you don't know and are not chronically online like I am, it is basically taking whatever little cases or something and building your own computer. And but
Mm,
it's a very sort of specific, I'm going to build a computer to put all of my like Spice Girls pictures on, or I'm going to build a computer that has all of my sewing patterns on it and it's going to be my quick reference. It's like it's a very but people are learning to code and
mm,
wire stuff. And even the technology, they're like, no, no, I'm taking this back because it's being the different features or upgrades or throttling and all the other stuff bricking
mhm,
your computer. People are like, no, I want that back.
mhm, mhm.
And yeah. So have you done a cyber deck yet?
I have it, and that sounds so interesting to me because so you said that like your computer programming was like programming your MySpace, right? And I'm
Yes.
like, oh yeah, like
Hmm.
I learned HTML so that I could like have a live journal, right? Like so that I could like
Yes.
put things on my live journal. So like I'm with you on that. And part of what makes this so interesting to me is that, especially as an educator, that I see like these sort of
Yeah.
generations of students, and I've been teaching now for what year is it now? 2026 for like 12 years ish.
Hmm.
Like as a graduate instructor and then as a full, and then as a professor.
Hmm.
Um, and one of the things that like I have noticed and that I care about teaching is like the what you have to do to figure things out, right? Like what does it mean to problem solve?
Right.
And that for like a lot of us millennials, a lot of like people who kind of grew up in this generation where computers were sort of new and emerging and we did a lot of figuring out, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so when we have this interface where like the AI button pops up and it says, "Do you want me to summarize this document for you?" You're not figuring anything out, right? You're
Right.
not and and so I think it's so interesting that people are going, "Oh no, there's value in like
Hmm.
figuring out how it works so that I can do it the way I want and I don't
Yes.
have to do the things that I don't want. I don't have to include these things that I
Hmm.
don't care about, right?" And that's where I'm like, "Oh yeah." And once you kind of like have that kernel in your mind, then you can go, "What else could I do this with, right? Can I make my own clothes?" Yeah, you can.
Right.
And they can fit just the way that you want them to, right? So it's this like figuring out that I think is so important that we kind of have had these like 15 years or so where user interface has really been focused away from that.
Yes, yes. So thinking about that is like you obviously know all of the history things. Is like when is like what were other times, particularly for craft or making or other stuff, where people were presented with the technology, said no thanks, and then went to the left. Like
Oh, yes.
what are some other things that have happened like that? It was like because
Yeah,
this isn't new. It was like
it's not,
people have regularly been saying no thanks in various ways.
not,
Yeah.
definitely not. I think like the big one that people like reference is the Luddites, the Luddite movement, right? Which of
Yes.
course I think is like both fascinating and extremely appropriate for our current moment,
Uh-huh.
and really interesting to me as somebody whose interests are in textiles because it's a
Hmm.
textile movement fundamentally, where we've got a group of textile workers. If I'm remembering correctly, they were predominantly stocking weavers.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that, but if I'm remembering this, this is in the early 19th century in Britain. And what they end up kind of protesting against is bringing in mechanized looms. So looms that
Hmm.
are running off of like a mill or something, right, where the water is pushing that. And you don't need one person at one loom. Instead, you have one person who's kind of watching to make sure the thread doesn't break on a dozen looms
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
more, right? And what the Luddites end up doing, of course, is they end up like breaking into the factories. They end up breaking the machines. They burn
Hmm.
them down. They physically threaten the owners of the factories. But they go to all of this after trying other options,
Yes.
right? After trying negotiation, after trying legislation, and that failing. So they go to it not as the first step, but later, which I think is a useful lesson for us to think about is like, what has failed
Hmm.
and what could we try next?
Yes.
But I think a big part of what I take away from that, there's kind of two things. One is that the rejection that the thing that they were rejecting wasn't just the loom itself, right? It's the everything that comes with it, which is that when you have a mechanized loom and you've got a dozen of them that just need one person to watch
Hmm.
them, you are losing the other 11 jobs. The person who is now in charge of those like 12 looms, I'm using that as an example,
Right.
doesn't need to be as skilled. They can be
Hmm.
paid less. Those jobs are usually going to women and children who they can pay even less than
Right.
the skilled men, right? So you're losing a lot of things. And the only reason those mechanized looms could exist in the first place is because they stole that knowledge from the artisans who had it, right?
Yes.
They took that from
Yes.
it, which is I just got a, like an Indeed email, which I don't know why I'm still on the Indeed email list from whenever I was searching for jobs like 15 years ago, but I am.
Right.
That was like, "Oh, would you like this art history job training AI in art history?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not going to teach the machine to steal my job. Like that's not and to do it worse."
Yeah.
Because the other lesson is that textiles are worse now than they were.
Yeah.
Is that we mechanized them, we made factory production, we like made them into something where they had to be homogenized. They had to be like they had to all
Yes.
be the same to be able to work
Yes.
with that because you don't have the individual artisan who can tell the differences in your fibers. And
Hmm.
so our textiles are worse now.
Yes. Just fundamentally, yes. And then any efforts to bring back that knowledge is so costly
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
so not that you shouldn't pay people, but
Yeah,
if we had
yeah,
maintained the knowledge base and the
yeah,
skills, it
yeah,
wouldn't be yeah, it's just a loss of so
yeah,
much stuff. All and it happens so quickly. It's
yeah.
like the it in like one or two generations, it just goes. It makes me think of the that one the one muslin that they're trying to bring back because the plant was
The
destroyed on the
muslin.
in India, where
Yeah.
it's like, but no one
Mhm.
knew how to spin it because it just went away. And
Yeah,
so some of these textiles are just
yeah. Like
gone.
we can't, and like yeah, machines can't do them as well. Like they're
Right.
not, you can't tune them to like the nuances of
Yes.
a fiber. Like a fiber is a natural thing, and like I
Hmm.
mean, not a polyester, but a natural fiber.
Right.
And so like yeah, our products are worse, but then also yeah, as you said, like it's expensive, but it's particularly expensive because we're all underpaid now because of
Yeah,
the
that's
Industrial Revolution, right?
yeah.
Like
It's the people who are taking the knowledge from other people are the ones who bend it, not the people who actually cultivated either the skills or the artistry or any of it. It's like they again get left out of the loop.
yeah,
So,
yeah. And
yeah.
that like that period is the only reason that like those mechanized looms could blow up the way they do is because they start to get cotton from
Hmm.
plantations in the Americas that are worked by enslaved people who we only were able to grow that cotton because we stole the knowledge from enslaved people. And
Right.
again, we're seeing the ways in which this like system of like violence and disenfranchisement and all these things just gets perpetuated and just becomes the new normal that we like live in today.
Right. And so like it goes along with the whole the stuff with the data centers is like, okay,
Yeah,
you may not see all the stuff that goes into it, but now you have all the reports and people I think know a little bit more about what all of that, one click of the button and you have this picture of a cat playing tambourine. Like they
yeah,
know exactly or have a better idea of what all went into that. Aside from, the 12 artists that were stolen and used to
yeah.
have their art trained to make the thing.
Yeah, yeah, and the like the people who are like living in formerly colonized countries who are being the people who are training the AI and the places where once that equipment in the data centers ends its life is going to
Mhm.
be dumped, which, they end their life sooner and sooner these days. So like it's yeah, like it's
That
not just the picture that's generated.
So yeah, and that goes to okay, so like the offcasts and different things, because that's one of the things, and I promise I will not I will not make the whole thing about cyberdecks. I just find the whole
Oh, it's really
technology
interesting.
part of it so
Yeah. Hmm.
interesting. Is
Hmm.
like it's going through it's the same sort of sorry, I'm getting a thing about upgrading. No, I always have to cut this out. So it's the same sort of thing about textiles. How there's a big right now in both sewing and quilting and stuff like that about creative reuse centers and people basically craft thrift stores. And so making do, and again, I look like this because this is my job. I realize I have like 30 bolts of fabric just on that shelf behind me. I understand that looks insane. So, but there's places to sort of pull out of that sort of wheel of you have to have the new thing, you have to have the new technology. What do you do with the old? I was like,
Hmm.
so there's that sort of way to take back the chains of production.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that I think like I also really love that. I love that we're seeing a lot more like pretty easy to access like
Yeah.
reuse centers and like fabric stores that are using like dead stock and things like that. Like where
Mhm.
before you had to go to like the fabric district somewhere in a big city and
Yes.
dig through the bit, but now you can get it a little bit more accessibly. I think
Hmm.
that's great. Like I buy a ton of my fabrics from like things like that because I think that's so valuable and you get like good quality for good prices and you're kind of like taking it out of this like chain of
Hmm.
destruction and yeah.
Well, and even with talking with some of my friends that own fabric shops or like the reuse centers, it was like the fabric that was made for especially for dress goods, the fabric that was made, 30, 40 years ago is
Mhm.
of a very different quality than what you can get now. So even
Totally.
that whole thing of and especially oh my gosh, so my degree is in textile and apparel design and so this was before Sheen and all of the other
Mhm.
stuff and stuff
Mhm.
like that.
Mhm.
But one of the one of the master's students, they did their master's thesis on, and they're like, I'm gonna knock myself off. So they made a whole couture line, and then they took it and they went through how I can make it cheaper and mass produced. And
Interesting.
it was super cool. And so that whole sort of thing is that there, even in the past like 5, 10 years, the access to the clothes and the stuff we have has gone downhill drastically. I was like, and it has not gotten any cheaper. So the whole, being able to make something that actually feels good or fits well, have it in your home, was like,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a whole bunch of people saying no thank you to different parts of this.
Definitely. Yeah.
So yeah, yeah. Anyway, I was like, I feel very spicy about this. It's like, because it's like the whole like at the same time, so in fashion history and textile history, particularly for the 20th century, you have, the space race and how that appeared in
Mhm.
textiles and stuff in the 60s. But at the same time, so you've got this high technology, high fashion, but at the same time you have the counterculture movement happening, and people are like, I'm gonna wear this skirt I made from tree leaves. Like it's the same. I feel like we're having the same sort of dichotomy.
Yeah. And I feel like, especially with social media and YouTube and TikTok and everything, it's like easier to access some of this information about like, okay, like what do these different fibers mean? When I like
Hmm.
read, it's like bamboo rayon. It's like what kind of greenwashing is happening there? If I read,
Yeah.
oh, it's like cotton linen, what does that mean? Like, and I think there's a lot more like I want to say easily accessible information. I think the information was accessible, but you had to like go to the library and find the book, right?
Yeah.
Whereas here
Yeah.
it might come across your like feed by happenstance and then you learn something. And I think there's something very exciting there. I don't think that's where anyone should stop. Look in books. I love books.
Yes, books are.
But I think it makes it sort of that you learn about things that you didn't know you needed to know about, right? You're
Mhm.
like, oh, I didn't realize this was a thing that I didn't understand. And now I can kind of do a deeper dive into it. And I think textiles are one of those areas that a lot of people are realizing suddenly, like, oh, when they say satin, satin is the weave, not the fiber, right? Like these
Yeah.
different small things. Yeah.
And the other thing too with any part of it is I think for some, depending on this is all about who you meet up with and who's in your community, but like hopefully you meet up with a group that is like, yes, none of us knew this and now we are working towards it, as opposed to the sort of mindset of why didn't you know this?
Right.
Like, so I think, but I think that goes back to sort of handcrafts at large, is like there's always been a large sort of passing of information, unless it's becomes your livelihood, in which case it's guarded very fiercely. But yes, yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you there. I think that like finding the groups that are like, oh, I didn't know this at one point. I'm excited for you to go from not knowing it to knowing it. Like, I mean, I'm
Hmm.
an educator, so like I'm always going to be excited about that, right?
Right,
Not everyone is always has that attitude that it can easily become a thing where you like look down on people. But
right.
when you find like that kind of that excitement of like, oh, you didn't know this thing. Let me like let me help you learn it.
Yes.
Like that's a great place to be. Yeah.
Yeah, it just it makes things go, especially when you're trying something new, and people who are either picking up sewing or whatever for the first time. There's a lot of that uncertainty of, well, it could be easier if I just did it this way, but I'm over
Yeah.
here trying to learn it for myself for the first time.
Yeah.
So where can they find you and follow along, and also possibly enroll? All this is not an ad for the university, but
Yes. So you can find me on Instagram. I am at Rare Device. So it's rare period device, which comes from a favorite poem of mine. You can find me there. I teach at Earlham College. So hey, if you're a student and you're looking for a small liberal arts place, reach out to me. I can tell you all about it. That's where I'm at right now. So you can find me. I post sewing content, but also like the many other handicraft things that I do and my life and my pets and all the things. So
and thank you for sharing all of those things, because like you said, you're multi-craftual, so there's all sorts of different things and cool things that you do in everyone. So thank you for joining us, thank you for chatting, and I appreciate it, and everyone else, we'll see you next time.
thank you.